Well, greetings. Welcome back to another edition of the Has Been, and I am a Has Been video slash podcast thing that that I'm doing here. Thanks for stopping by. Appreciate it. Beautiful day in the area, as you can tell, as we have our outdoor studio up and running. We'll have to shut it down at some point as we get deeper into the fall and the winter, but as of now, we take advantage of the nice weather. Today, which is Monday, September the 15th, recap what happened with Purdue football against USC on Saturday, the 3 hour rain delay or weather delay, and also look ahead to Notre Dame game on Saturday, and also a couple basketball items that probably are going to come down this week uh, because everybody likes the Big Ten schedule. But anyway, football last weekend, they hosted USC, and they lost, as you know, 33-17. And I think the one word that at least I take out of uh, Saturday's game, and this is, yes, they had turnovers, they had a few penalties, they, missed some tackles here and there. I mean, they played well, but not, they just don't have the horses to match up with USC. But the one word that I think that I take out of Saturday's game was just encouraged. I think you can be encouraged about what you saw Saturday. You can be encouraged about what we've seen the first three games from this coaching staff and these players. Um, Now, what does that mean when they go to Notre Dame on Saturday? And what does that mean when they host Illinois in a couple of weeks? What does it mean when they play Michigan and Ohio State in November and go to Washington? And the schedule, what does it mean? I don't know. I don't know how many wins it'll add up to. But I think you walked out of Saturday after spending however many hours there because of the 3 hour and 5 minute rain delay. Um, I think you should be encouraged by what you're seeing and what this coaching staff is doing with these players, the energy that they play with, um, the focus that they play with. Yeah, I mean, they had some penalties there, but this wasn't like last year where you had undisciplined penalties, you had things just running amok. Um, Actually, USC had more penalties, more undisciplined penalties than Purdue, and that's probably the one area that they got to get cleaned up if they want to really challenge for a college football playoff spot or maybe get close to the top of the Big Ten. But with Purdue, I mean, there's plenty to clean up, no question. But there was a lot I think to like. When you dissect the turnovers, which were big because USC got 17 points off those interceptions. But the way Purdue moved the ball, especially early, um, and the way that their defense kind of hung in there, um, made them kick field goals instead of just giving up touchdowns on every possession. Now, USC moved the ball in regular fashion. I don't have the stats in front of me, but I don't believe they punted. But it didn't seem like a game that um, that you would reveal that if you were to say that USC didn't punt, you expect them to have 50 points, but they only had 33, which was half of what they've been averaging in their first two games. So I think you give some credit to Purdue's defense to be able to hang in there, get off the field when they needed to. The one issue that they had was not getting off the field on fourth down. They did a good enough job on third down. They because USC was 4 of 13 on third down, but ended up being 4 and 4 on fourth down. And two of those fourth down conversions came during a scoring drive. The other um, fourth down conversion came during another scoring drive. So again, a lot of areas to clean up, but I just, uh, did Purdue take a big step forward in this game? Maybe not a big step forward, but they were competitive into the second half. They were um, they were a play here or there from making this a closer game. And until the third interception, that was kind of the crushing blow, the last interception. They were in position to make it a one score game as you got into the fourth quarter. And then you take your chances at that point you put some game pressure on USC, which had, played a couple blowouts in its first two games. Purdue had some game pressure against Southern Illinois where the first quarter went back and forth and they had to respond. But again, I think encouraged is the word that I would use. You may have a different one, but I just think you should be encouraged by what you've seen. Now, if they go up to Notre Dame on Saturday and get wiped away, if it's similar to last year, will you be encouraged? I don't think we're lining up in a situation where uh, Notre Dame's going to set a program record like for Purdue and win 66-7. I would be surprised if that happened. I'd be surprised if it's that lopsided of a game. It may end up 15 to 20 points, 25, who knows. But, the things that we've seen out of this program so far in 2025, they're more disciplined, they're better prepared, they're better coached, the fundamentals are better. Um, you can see an identity starting to form with this team, with this program. They needed to have a little bit more success with the run against the Trojans. Um, they didn't get that. There was some aggressiveness early going for it on a fourth down um, I think during their first drive. But you do have to clean up the mistakes. You got to clean up the turnovers, and to me, that was the biggest deal on Saturday. You're driving on that first possession, or yeah, you're driving. You're down 3-0. You got a chance to get ahead 7-3. You got a chance to get ahead of USC, which they haven't been behind all year. And Ryan Brown threw a little bit late over the middle. The defender juggled it a little bit, then came up with it. Kind of it zapped your energy there. I mean, USC then goes up 10-0, and then they get to halftime at 17-3. And it was an uphill climb, but it didn't feel like it was insurmountable. Where in previous years, if Purdue got behind 17-3 against that quality of competition, you felt like there was no way that they would be able to come back. But Purdue kept plugging along. They kept making plays in the passing game. Took advantage of some penalties. So again, they should have, they needed to get a little bit more out of the running game. And I think they averaged maybe less than 3 yards a carry. Uh, Mockabee had a couple nice runs, but he didn't pop the big one. And again, you're dealing with bigger, stronger, faster athletes on the other side that you didn't deal with the first 2 weeks. And once Purdue settled in to that, knowing who they were going up against on both sides of the ball, I felt like they made a good account of themselves in this game. I mean, USC is not. I don't see USC as winning the Big Ten. I don't see them in the top two or three. But they'll be on the outside of the college football playoff trying to sneak in there. And I think it's not this week, but next week they play Illinois in Champaign. And I think that's one to look at as far as one of those teams getting an edge to sneak into the college football playoff. Because you have Oregon, you got Ohio State, Michigan's right there. Obviously Penn State is right there. And Oregon in a couple weeks, Oregon and Penn State play in a couple weeks as well. But I don't think one loss hurts them as much as a loss to Illinois would hurt USC, or Illinois loses to USC. So I think that's kind of the group of teams right now uh, that are going to be in the conversation for a college football playoff. You still have Indiana um, that will be there, but they're going to have to beat some people. They need to probably beat Illinois this week at home. So we've got some games coming up in the Big Ten that's really going to shape the picture of the college football playoff from the conference's standpoint, as far as who's going to get in. But I think USC is in that conversation. Illinois is in that conversation, obviously. Um, so a lot of things are going to play out. My point is that Purdue played a really good team on Saturday, very athletic, very big at the receiver position. They played jump ball in the secondary and won a lot of one-on-one matchups. And Purdue was just at this point in its roster, this point in this development of this program under Barry Odom, just they don't have that kind of athlete to go up and battle the big receivers that they have, the targets that they have. Got a very nice tight end. The quarterback solid. Um, so Purdue was at a disadvantage from an athletic standpoint and a talent standpoint in this game. And whether the 3 hour delay had any impact, both teams had to do it. So I wouldn't say USC's was at the short end of it, because of, if you've ever seen the visiting locker room facilities at Purdue, they're not the greatest in the world. Where Purdue had, they had the Molotov Center that they could go stretch out. They had their big locker room. I know they fed the team again when they had a delay. Um, so Purdue had a better advantage with the 3 hour weather delay than USC. USC was, I think, on stationary bikes underneath the stadium and trying to, relax and rest and all that kind of stuff. But um, if there was a team that would been disadvantaged by it, I think it would have been USC, because the home team's going to have the comforts of their locker room and all that. So Purdue's defense, again, settled in, um, gave the offense a chance, but too many turnovers. The fluke turnover on the interception where Ryan Brown got sandwiched with two defenders, and then the ball pops in the air, and 6'5", 360-pound defensive tackle plucks it out of the air and then goes to the house for a pick six. That was a backbreaker. Um, but Purdue got back into the game and they were driving till the very end, and then another interception kind of sealed it. So you got to eliminate those mistakes, especially the ones in the red zone. And that two of those interceptions were in the red zone, and they've got to clean those up to have any chance to beat anybody in the Big Ten. Um, and the other part is that you can practice all you want and you can preach all you want, but the defense has to create some takeaways. Because we're going, three straight games in this season. They haven't got a takeaway yet. They've turned the ball over now 4 times, so they're -4. on the takeaways. Um, and they gave up 17 points last week off turnovers, and they lost by 16. It's you can do the math on that, but they need to create some takeaways. It's not a scheme. I don't believe it's a scheme thing. They've forced one fumble in the last two seasons. Um, they don't have a lot of interceptions. Um, but usually these things come in bunches. Um, and it's not happening for Purdue right now. Maybe they get a bunch on Saturday at Notre Dame, but they need to create takeaways. They need to get some turnovers to eliminate having to drive 80 yards or 75 yards or 70 yards every single time to score. Um, the longer you have the ball, the more plays you run, the more opportunity there is to not be successful, or you have your own turnover. They need some explosive plays, um, and if you can get some short fields, uh, that opens up your playbook a lot. Purdue did score on a trick play last week, two backward passes, which didn't really execute the way it was supposed to be, but um, USC almost had another pick six if the defender gets the ball or holds on to the ball instead of fumbling it, and then Ryan Brown picking it up and getting into the end zone. So Purdue scored in an unconventional manner. Um, in that regard, but so did USC. So that uh, um, kind of canceled each other out. So now they go to Notre Dame, and similar to last year, Notre Dame's coming off a bad loss. Um, they lost it to Texas A&M by 1 point on Saturday night. They're 0-2. I think it's the second time in Marcus Freeman's tenure that they've started 0-2. Last year they were coming off the loss to Northern Illinois, and they got themselves fixed when they came to Purdue, and then went on a run to put themselves in a position for the college football playoff and made it all the way to the final game. They're going to need a similar situation this year, and we'll see if it starts with Purdue. But it's Purdue's first road game. Uh, you know, things are different on the road. There's more noise. Um, the attention to detail is greater. So Purdue's really going to have to be focused. And, this is going to be something new for this team to go on the road for the first time with this coaching staff and these players and see how they handle that environment. Because, they played three home games. And then after Notre Dame, you got a week off. And then you got Illinois at home. So that's four home games in the early part of the year. And then after that, you're going to spend majority of your time on the road, because they'll go to Minnesota, they'll go to Northwestern, then you go to Michigan, and then you go to Washington. So they got some tough road environments coming up, and they're going to have to perform. If you think you can beat Minnesota at Minnesota, you're going to have to perform well on the road. If you think you can go to Northwestern in the little rinky-dink stadium that they play in and take care of business, you're going to have to do it on the road. Um, Same with Michigan, same with Washington. So Saturday is a good test. Um, and Notre Dame's going to be a little bit angry. They want to get themselves straightened out so they can make a run to the college football playoff. And this is I don't know if the players look at this as a rivalry game. Um, it is a rivalry game. It has been for years. But with the transfer portal and all that, how much how much do they view that as a rivalry game? I mean, it's an interesting question. It's probably um, it's left open for another segment somewhere about are rivalries still do rivalries still carry the weight that they did 5, 10, 20, 30 years ago? Because you're just bringing players in on a 1 year basis, mercenaries, so to speak, who are not invested maybe in the program and its tradition and its history. I think it's important to Barry Odom. I think it's important to the coaching staff. It's clearly important to the fan base. It's important uh, to the people around Purdue. But from a player standpoint, how important is a rivalry with Notre Dame? How important is a rivalry? They have another trophy game with Illinois. How important is a rivalry game with Illinois? And will the bucket game lose some of its meaning as we get deeper into the transfer portal and all this, where half your roster wasn't here the year before, they don't know much about what the bucket means and all that. I mean, in the past, you came to a school, came to Purdue, for example, you knew that you would play Indiana at the end of the year, whether you're from in-state or out of state. The bucket, was a big deal. Winning the bucket was a big deal. And I'll be interested to see how all this plays out uh, over the course of time. And do rivalries get a little bit diminished um, because of the transfer portal? Now, Michigan, Ohio State probably will stay at the top of the world because of the stakes for that game. The stakes are not only high um, within that rivalry, but usually the stakes are pretty high for the college football playoff and other things. I know Oregon and Oregon State are playing. They call that the Civil War. But again, with the transfer portal, you know, are new players coming in, and what's the meaning of that? And you can ask players the question. Like this week, you could ask Purdue players what the rivalry with Notre Dame would mean. And I'm sure they would give some canned answer, or they've been coached to give an answer that tells you that the rivalry is important. But if they're being truthful, I'm not sure a lot of these players know that Purdue and Notre Dame play for a trophy. Now, they may have been coached up on it in their meeting on Sunday as they looked at Notre Dame to say, yeah, they play for the shillelagh. Or when you get to the bucket game, we play for the old Oakham bucket. Or you get to Illinois, you play for the little tiny cannon. Um, and does that resonate with them? Now, if they're from the state of Indiana, it probably does resonate with them. But if you're bringing players in from the southeast, the southwest, the northeast, wherever, do these things resonate for them, and is it important to them? And I don't think we have an answer to that yet. Um, but in the past, you've brought in players from Texas and Florida, but they seem to when they came here from out of state, they seem to embrace at least the Indiana rivalry or the Notre Dame rivalry. They embraced it because it was part of the history. It was something that when you came on your recruiting visit, um, it was mentioned. It was important. So it kind of sticks with them if you end up coming to Purdue. But again, I don't have it. I don't. There's not enough evidence right now to say how this is going to play out. I mean, I think as observers of college football and college sports in general, we know about the rivalries. We know the importance of the rivalries. We know what it means. But do these players that are coming in, maybe for 1 year, do they fully embrace it and understand it? You want them to. but do they? Or is it not important to them? Or is it just lip service when they're asked about it? Um, Now, I mean, the playing Notre Dame's a little different because it's a national program, um, and you don't have states bragging rights on the line, even though both schools are in the state. Um, and if you ask Notre Dame people about playing Purdue, they probably don't view it as a rivalry because they've owned the series for the most part, and they've got bigger games on their schedule. USC, for example, um, that they would deem as bigger rivalry games. So as I do on these things, I get sidetracked and go off on a tangent. So that's I'm just warning you that that's part of what happens with this thing. So we appreciate your patience. But anyway, Purdue's got a tall task ahead of it on Saturday is the bottom line. And um, but I don't think it's on the road, so it's a little there's different challenges there. But if Purdue plays with the poise it played with last week, and they're going to have a plan. We know that. We've seen Barry Odom and this team and this coaching staff have a plan for every game. They're going to have a plan, and they're going to adjust, and they're going to do what they need to do to make it work. Um, so I would expect that Purdue's depending on where you get your betting lines, 25-point underdog, which is a big number, but I think it was 2014 Purdue opened the season against Notre Dame in Lucas Oil Stadium, and they were a 30-point underdog. So 25 seems small compared to 30. And Purdue traditionally is an underdog in this series over time, but 30 was a pretty big number a few years, about what, 11 years ago when they played in Indianapolis. So 25. Yeah, I wonder what it'd been if Notre Dame had beat Texas A&M. Would it have been 30? I think there was some early indications in the summer that it might tip 30 points um, based on what happened with Purdue last year. But now that I think people have seen Purdue play and understand that it's not the same team as it was last year, that 25, it probably should be a little bit lower than that because you're looking at what, 3.5 touchdowns. Um, last week's spread was, I think it ended up 20 and a half in favor of USC, and Purdue kind of covered that number. Can Purdue do enough to cover that number on Saturday? They're going to have to eliminate explosive plays from Notre Dame. They're going to have to create a few on their own. And again, you got to eliminate the turnovers, but you also got to start getting some takeaways. Um, and right now, that's kind of the difference. And after that, they're on their off week, on their first off week, and then they get ready for Illinois, and they get ready for a really, really important month of October. And we'll delve into that as that approaches. But October is shaping up right now as the make or break month uh, for this team this year. If they plan on doing anything beyond what is expected, and what's expected is 3 or 4 wins. If they're going to take a step beyond that, then October is a huge month for them. But just to get to 3 or 4 wins with this program would be a step in the right direction. But we'll delve into that at another time. All right. Well, we appreciate you stopping by. Um, and you can catch this on the YouTube page. It also is out there in the podcast universe somewhere, Apple Podcast or Spotify or whatever. I clearly don't know where it goes when I push a button. I wish I did. I wish someone would tell me, but it's what happens when you're has been. You just don't have enough information, or you don't have enough people around you to fill you in. Anyway, we appreciate you stopping by. Uh, Coming up this week, Um, the Big Ten men's and women's basketball schedules are scheduled to come out. I think the women on Thursday. Um, and we'll go over those when those come out. I mean, we do know that the women are going to LA. The men are going to LA to play USC and UCLA. Just don't know when that is going to happen. But that's part of the schedule. It's also based on the order of the teams that you play and when you play them. Um, there were supposed to be some tweaks, at least to the men's schedule this year. I don't think the women tweaked their schedule at all. But there are supposed to be some subtle changes in the men's schedule, and we'll see if that happens, or if they just stick. You know, one of their parameters is 2 days between games once you get in the Big Ten season, and the women will play one game before Christmas. Actually, I can tell you they'll play on December 7th on the road, and then they'll play the remaining of their games after Christmas. The men usually play two games before Christmas and then play the remaining games after that. And I would expect that to happen again. Um, and then you get into the meat of the Big Ten season. But those schedules should be out this week, and when they get out, we'll dissect them a little bit. With the women, they got off to such a bad start in the Big Ten last year, in part because of who they played. Um, they were 0-10 to um, start the Big Ten season, and it was just so hard to recover for them. And it's a tough league. It's a very daunting league. Maybe they get some relief as far as teams they play early, but probably not, knowing knowing the Big Ten. Um, so it's unforgiving, but they gotta figure a way to do it. And that's the goal, and that's kind of the mission of what they're facing this year. Anyway, we'll delve into that as those come out, and then might have another might do a short pod video cast later in the week, just examining and talking about, should Purdue football continue to play Notre Dame after this current contract is up. Um, I think it's a worthy subject to delve into a little bit, just because of what you're trying to do with your program. Um, I think fans enjoy the Notre Dame game, but you have to understand the other part of this and where Purdue's trying to go. We'll get into that this week. So there's your preview. Hold me to it, and then be back later on in the week to talk about all those things. Thanks for stopping by. Appreciate it, and have a good day.